Er zijn 3 dingen in het leven van een kunstenaar. Ten eerste, te kunnen werken. Ten tweede, goed te kunnen werken. En ten derde, de grootst mogelijke weerklank bij zijn publiek te vinden.
Who's afraid of art? Tyrants and wannabe tyrants, so it seems.
Artist Alexandra Skotchelenko has been sentenced to 7 years in prison by St. Petersburg's invasion, spreading false information, disinformation.
With autocracy growing, with tyrants on the roll, the Balie brings together over 40 international artists, writers and thinkers during Forum on European Culture. We celebrate the subversive power of art and literature and curate works of opposition that preserve the histories autocrats want to erase and imagine the futures they fear.
So my question is, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Art against the tyrants. Not for the faint-hearted.
Good afternoon and welcome to Techdenkers. Thank you for joining us once again. I see a few familiar faces, but a lot of new faces. So I'm going to explain to you what Techdenkers is. For the past 2.5 years, I've had the honor to make this series in collaboration with Agen, and especially to explore the influence of technology on our democracy. And for me, and I hope for you too, this question feels more urgent than ever, with tech oligarchs not just building platforms, but shaping global power structures. In his farewell speech, President Biden warned of a tech industrial complex and an oligarchy of extreme wealth. His successor, Donald Trump, underlined that point by giving front row seats to Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Tim Cook at the inauguration. There are a lot of spaces here, if you want. Not on the stairs, but maybe here? Welcome. Where was I? So once celebrated as visionary enterprises driving process and innovation, tech companies have become questionable forces in our democracies. So from data privacy scandals to monopolistic practices and spreading misinformation on a wild scale, big tech has undermined public trust while molding the very fabric of our democracies. So tonight we ask, how are the tech oligarchs shaping democracy and how do we respond? I'm so honored to be joined by 2 international thought leaders who bring political and critical insight into this conversation, one with a journalistic and philosophical perspective, and one through a technological and political lens. And I'm going to introduce them to you. Marietje Schaake, she's Director of International Policy at the Cyber Policy Center at Stanford University. And from 2009 to 2019, she was a member of the European Parliament for Deze Successor. In 2024, her book, The Tech Coup, How to Save Democracy from Silicon Valley, was published. We also had a talk with her here, and I was very impressed with her work, and that's why I thought, who can I connect with her work? Of course, Ece Temelkuran, who we welcomed here 2 years ago, because she's a journalist and writer, and in 2012, she was fired from the Turkish newspaper she was working for at the time, and for writing critically about the Erdogan government. In 2019, she published How to Lose a Country, The 7 Steps from Democracy to Dictatorship, followed by Together, 10 Choices for a Better Now, and a lot of other works, but especially her new work, forthcoming Nation of Strangers. She delves into the intricate meaning of home in the 21st century. Please give them a warm welcome. Thank you for being here. I want to start with, well, there's a lot of things happening in the world right now. There's a genocide in Gaza, there's a rise of the far right in Europe, there's an ongoing war in Ukraine. Tech billionaires like Elon Musk are influencing public discourse more than elected leaders. I think my first question is, how are you sitting here today? What is important for you today, and especially in this conversation? I'm going to start with you.
I'm sitting here fired up to change.
That's what we love. Okay. And what do you want to change?
Well, I think the only thing we can do is to take all of these cues, and you're right, that from the genocide in Gaza to the role of tech billionaires and everything in between, everything that I believe is foundational for our freedoms, our rights, our quality of life, everything I ever believed in and fought for as a politician, is under assault. And so I've seen, in talking about my book, for example, how paralyzing it is for people. People truly feel overwhelmed, and I cannot blame them. The young generation has already suffered through, inheriting a climate crisis, living through COVID, having a hard time going through higher education, finding homes, etc. And now on top of that, there is a radical break in the transatlantic relation, enormous uncertainty. Kids are wondering, are we going to serve in the army? How is my future going to unfold? But we cannot allow ourselves to stay bogged down in worries and in an overwhelmed sense of everything that's happening to us. I mean, I talk to my American colleagues and friends, and I'm actually very shocked at how little pushback we see in the United States.
From whom?
From everyone who doesn't want to lose their country. And I would have expected more mass protests, more collaboration between universities who are being attacked, students standing up for people who are being pulled off the street by civilian-closed immigration officers brought to secret detention facilities without access to a lawyer. I mean, where is the solidarity? And so in times where I try to imagine what's necessary, we can take inspiration from people who've actually been there. And so I constantly think about what Maria Ressa, Nobel Prize winner, journalist, author of the book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator, says. Because she's actually lived it, as a dual citizen between the US and the Philippines, founder of Rappler that came under assault of Duterte in the Philippines. The easiest thing for her to do would have been to go back to the United States. It would have been one plane ticket, but she never did. She, until this day, continues to go back to the Philippines. And her motto is, and I think it's really what we need to take inspiration from right now, hold the line. Which means you fight every inch of freedom and rights and assault to the rule of law that they take from you. And I can only hope that people will stand up and hold the line, because I think that that's necessary. And it's actually, energizing me from a combination of anger and opportunity. And I'll talk about the opportunity part later, but the anger, I hope, is a bit more clear now.
Yeah. What about you, Ece? Are you angry? Marietje also says overwhelmed.
First of all, I'm happy to be here. I have to say that. Hello, welcome. First, this young woman, Rosalie, is absolutely brilliant, and she's good people. You have to meet her in person. And Marietje, there's a political reason I'm saying these things, and Marietje is an absolutely brilliant writer, and she did an amazing thing to warn people and to show the very dark thing that's going to happen to us. It's happening to us right now. And I'm happy to see that all these people are interested in the topic on such a beautiful day in Amsterdam, rather than going out and hanging out. You come here, so thank you. Lovely. The political reason I'm saying these things is because I don't believe anymore in looking at darkness. I believe in looking at light. Marietje would know best what I mean when I say I saw the darkness when I met the tech bros in a very interesting, strange place on the top of the Alps in a bunker. I'll talk about it later. So I saw the ultimate shade of black. I was 2 days with these guys. I didn't get paid, by the way. And then I really saw the ultimate shade of black. And I, for the first time, to be honest, I understood what's going to happen, what their plan is. And it was so terrifying. After this meeting, I didn't talk for 3 days, because what I have witnessed was too much. And I didn't know where to begin to talk about it. And I thought, after 3 days, perhaps human eye's retina is crippled if you look at the ultimate black, if you stare into it. And the only thing that you can do is turn yourself to the light, to the people. So whenever I am with good people, I appreciate it, I cherish this, and not only because I value friendship as a moral and political concept, but also I came to think that we have nothing else but each other. So we have to take care of each other like in a proper way, like kindness, compassion, and so on and so forth. Because only then actually we can hold the line. I'm not angry because anger consumed me. I come from Turkey, by the way. So many people, not only in Turkey, like in Italy, in India, in Pakistan, in several other places that had been through the journey of losing democracy, losing the moral values of a country, they know that they would probably agree with me that you spend time with anger. Of course, you get very angry. Of course, there is still anger in me. But then somehow you start thinking that, this is not sustainable. That's why I think we should replace anger with dedicated attention, which you are doing, actually. You are calling people to pay attention to what's happening. Anger is not sustainable, one thing, but then anger is also, thanks to these guys, like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and so on and so forth, it is the most commodified human emotion at the moment. Our anger is there for them to make profit. So we have to find a impossible to commodify state of mind to sustain our dedication to hold the line to save democracy. How am I?
Yeah.
Nowadays, what I think about is, this is like a little bit contrary to what you say, we have to accept the defeat. Well, I started from at the end of the topic, but I think everybody knows what we are talking about. We don't need the introduction to the topic. Everybody is, I assume this. I'm like, everybody knows what we are going through. Fascism is coming to Europe. I don't have to say this. Trump already performed very well in like few months. He managed to do what Erdogan did in 20 years. So yeah, we are there. We're about on the edge, like, we're about to fall down from here. So I was thinking perhaps we should accept defeat, but then I'll talk about it later, and how beautiful it can be to accept the defeat, how actually we can refresh ourselves after accepting the defeat, dropping the act, and we don't need to pretend anymore that we count, because we don't count. Nobody asks our opinion anymore to do things. So maybe we should find humility in that defeat. And in that humility, we should understand that we have to be in solidarity, not because it's a nice thing, but it is because we need that for survival, like actual survival. So I'm thinking about defeat nowadays and how liberating it is to accept that the old ways that we have tried have failed, it's going to fail, and we have to be more clear about what we say and more precise about what we believe in.
But it also sounds very pessimistic, and you said I'm not going to focus on the dark.
Exactly the opposite, because Mamdani, you know about this New York mayor who just... Actually, like Trump, he did something very interesting. He said it as it is. He didn't, tweak the words. He didn't crook. He didn't bend. He said, I want some socialist stuff in this country. I think he accepted the defeat of the old ways, and he acted on the fact that we have nothing to lose from this point on, so we have to be clear about what we say. So the defeat I'm talking about is that defeat, like pretending and then, assuming that we are listened to and so on. No, we don't matter anymore. Our lives do not matter in that sense. I think this should be a liberating fact for everybody. If you don't matter, you can be anybody. You can be a hero if you don't matter, actually.
Is that fact liberating for you?
Well, I just think that like Ece described, she's at a different stage in going through the grief of the loss of, you know, everything Turkey was and has become, and how that fascism, attacks on democracy are going global. And so the places where you can go are shrinking. And I think in Europe, we're at a different stage. I mean, I agree that it's coming here, and of course there are now coalitions of very influential and powerful people, including some tech leaders who are wanting to destroy the European Union and destroy our democracy. But I actually think we have a chance that we will be woken up on time because of Trump.
Yeah.
And the tech CEOs. I think the problem that I describe in the book, that there's a systemic threat to democracy because tech companies have too much power, and how that power manifests itself, often invisible, whereas the inauguration of Donald Trump made it very visible. I think that reality has hit home. The reality of our lack of relying on the US for security has hit home. The risk of the weaponization of technology against our core values of our open societies has hit home. So I'm not 100% confident that we will act, and when I say we, I mean European leaders will act decisively enough and quickly enough, but I do think there's a chance. And so I guess the best thing I can do is to encourage them to lead, and to break down some of the bigger conceptual ideas that I think people are now rallying behind into actionable steps that we can take today. Because if we keep talking about big picture, you know, digital sovereignty and, you know, strategic autonomy, all these very adequate objectives, but if we do not do something different now to get there as soon as we can, then we're not doing enough. So I think the work is before us. I mean, it's too early to conclude, but we still have a fighting chance, and I think we should take it.
Yeah.
So true. I mean, like Trump, in some way, has been like, you know, this shock therapy to Europe, and they have seen how embarrassing it can get. And I remember this Gaza video, especially. That he, I don't know if you remember the Gaza video that he released, you know, with AI. He's with Netanyahu sunbathing in Gaza because Gaza has turned into a resort and they are like with their beautiful bodies sunbathing. I think that level of shamelessness was somehow alarming for Europe, and they didn't want to associate with that, so they kind of fallen this way, like, you know, okay, we don't want that much of. But then my point, you know, my question is rather, can they? And is it about European leaders at all, or is it about the companies, the firms, the corporate part of the story? And I'm hoping to talk about more of that today, rather than the, you know, institutions, European institutions, or, you know, political institutions. Because the corporate world, can they say no to Elon Musk when he comes with all these billions of dollars, or Jeff Bezos like he does right now in Venice? Can they say no? I don't think so. So, you know, there is a problem with, yeah, you know, when we talk about fascism, unfortunately, we will have to talk about capitalism.
Yeah.
And this is the point where European mainstream media, European mainstream intellectuals want to stop. They don't want to talk about that. But it all comes to the fact that it's about money, stupid. It's about economy. So yeah, this is where the game changes, I think. And then it is almost unfair. I don't know what you think, but it is almost unfair to expect European institutions to stop it, to stop this this rush into the loss of democracy, loss of human dignity, loss of whatever, all the institutions that protect the individual from the cruelty of the system.
I want to interrupt here because I asked you both to write a speech. So what I'm suggesting is that, Ece, I welcome you to give us that speech, because you talked about hope, you talked about defeat. I think that's a good link to what you're going to say, as well as the conversation we're having now, and we're going to circle back to that later, if that's
Okay.
Do you want to stand there? Yeah. A warm welcome, please. No, let's go.
Okay, actually, normally I do speeches. I don't read things, but this time I will read it. You'll know why. This was a piece I published in several places, including Guardian, and it's called Cloud Fascism. It tells a little bit about what we are talking. I read it bits, and then at some point I'll stop. Clothes are off. The cutthroat order of the world no longer pretends to be pretty. The icing on the cake, the rule of law, liberal democracy, human rights, and all that is now unnecessary. All the bearings we depend on, all that we imagine would protect us from the dark forces, are melting. Fascism, after making a strong foothold in the political sphere, is now threatening basic human morality. It is as if genocide is pending, and it will be against all those basic human decency. The world has become heartless. Thus, there is no point in calling the rulers to shame or listing the atrocities in politics and morality. It is a system where those who speak of dignity, equality, and feelings for fellow humans are simply an annoying redundancy. Rather than dragging the old ways and being crushed repeatedly, it is better to admit we are defeated. Defeat is not the most uplifting word, and many seek hope in a heartless world. Yet, when there is no hope, which is often the case in today's world, we need faith. It's interesting that I am doing this with this guy here. But then you have to take him seriously because he's the only, actually, so far, only successful revolutionary, because the revolution he has done lasted for 2,000 years, so he knew something. I don't mean religious faith, by the way, but faith in humans and in ourselves. Throughout human history, our kind has survived not by waiting for hope, but by renewing our faith in humanity through action. People, each time there was no hope to make things right, they just began the action, even when there was no hope for victory. Today, there is enough outrage to bring down the old, and we have more than enough ideas to build the new. But we might have to accept defeat first. Not morally, perhaps, but certainly in almost all the political battlefields. Admitting this reality will liberate us from our delusions and give us the humility to change our vocabulary. We need, more than anything else, humility and the freedom of those who admit they have little to lose anymore. We have to admit that we are all in a universe where we all click the accept button, for we are not powerful enough to change the terms and the conditions. We are defeated by cloud fascism, which is a new form of fascism. You see, fascism had a style once. Uniforms, parades, nicely curated, terrifying flags. Now it's casual, speaks in hashtags, and recommends your next fascist light podcast based on your smoothie preferences. This is cloud fascism, sleek, emoji-friendly monster, and we are all feeding it with our attention spans. Where old-school fascism shouted in town square, this one warms through your algorithms and gives you a sweet pillow talk through your phone screen. And worse, it knows your favorite panda video. They don't need secret police when they got predictive analytics. They don't need censorship when outrage boosts the algorithm. It's not Big Brother anymore. It's the sleek CEO with a $1 billion IPO, a TED Talk, an interest in mindfulness, and a constant offer of safe spaces. Cloud fascism, with its cloud-like vagueness, fluidity, and slipperiness, its everywhereness, but at the same time nowhereness, is quite like moving storm cloud. Right now it's in Turkey, operating through the imprisonment of Erdogan's political rivals. Now it's in Israel, starving Palestinian children. After appearing on Italian shores to push back refugees to the sea, it suddenly shows up in the US, raining on a new land through the border police. Cloud fascism has infinite hands committing unpredictable crimes with the randomness that we all try to catch up with and adapt to. Like anyone looking at the sky and waiting for the clouds to rain on us, we idly wait. And after a short while, we lose our ability to be shocked, unwillingly normalizing the cloud as if now it's a natural phenomenon we must live with, as if the cloud simply is, like the unpreventable technological progress. To be honest, and the piece talks about that a little bit, cloud fascism is not the most brilliant idea. Well, I've written it, but it's not really brilliant. No, I talk about it in the piece as well. The reason we are doing this, people like me, writing, thinking, and so on, we want to come up with a very sexy word for this fascism, this new form of fascism. Not because, it's not necessarily because we want to analyze it or, we want to show our analytical skills and so on. We want to we want people to pay attention. Pay attention, be alarmed and so on. This is the reason why we're doing it. But then also, we want to find this very sexy, catchy word, that grasps the situation, grasps what we feel about the period of our age and so on, so that you come together. So the reason I talk about cloud fascism, and I can go on describing it in the most detailed, eloquent, ways, but the reason I'm talking about cloud fascism because I am imagining a cloud solidarity, cloud resistance. Just like every awareness of cloud fascism or its no-awareness, we can imagine a everywhere and nowhere kind of solidarity. How do we do that? And I'm using these words, cloud fascism, whatever, to, just to make you think that there might be a cloud solidarity everywhere, it's nowhere, and everybody is part of it. So we all do these things just for people to come together and to, express their political energy, their outrage. Because it's an inhumane world. Even though we are in Amsterdam, we are in this very chic place, super artistic, I love everything. I feel like I'm part of an art piece at this stage. We are very, very secure at the moment. We have nothing in common with the tragedy of the rest of the world. Nothing is happening to us, the things that are happening in Gaza. But then I want to believe that people are outraged still, even by watching it, even by knowing it. So what I am trying to do by talking about cloud fascism is to show you that you can as well be part of cloud solidarity. And as Marietje said, you can also hold the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Ece. I'm going to go to you, Marietje. I saw you writing down. How do you react to this casual, sexy cloud fascism?
Well, I think it's indeed one of the problems of our time, that we look at technology as something good, exciting, entertaining, efficient, accessible, undeniable. We want to be a part of it. We don't want to miss it individually and collectively. Now with AI, everybody wants to try it, laughs about it, doesn't want to miss the boat. And I think we continue to fail to understand what it is we're sacrificing by living on the platforms of tech billionaires that indeed are increasingly undermining or attacking democracy. And it's a spectrum, but giving away so much agency and freedom to people who are in the world to be accountable to their shareholders, to be faster than the competitor, to make profits, and who are not in the world to protect the public interest, to balance the rights of majority and minority populations, to protect national security or fundamental freedoms and what have you, all the very difficult things that governments have to do. And this is why I do think this is where we left it before Ece gave her talk. We do have to address political leaders, because as much as I'm critical of the tech billionaires, and you know everybody by now I think knows I am, I'm also very critical of the leaders in democratic countries who've allowed us to all, you know, dance into this situation. And so I think what you are saying is very powerful in the sense that it's not tangible enough for a lot of people to see where the harm and the danger and the fascism comes from. And so in that sense, I see that there's an opening, and I'll talk about it whenever I'll speak, an opening in this moment because it has suddenly become visible. You know, what was long invisible and had the entertainment and the fun and the efficiency first is now much more, at least in Europe, seen as a danger. And so that momentum that we have now is actually an opening. And I think it is up to every one of us how we use that opening.
Exactly. So, you know, I'm so grateful to Trump because, no, I mean, like, all the other similar leaders have this kind of mannerism that kind of conceals the evil, at the core, but Trump says it as it is. And I am thankful to him because he put all these guys at the inauguration, at the podium. And you know what I felt like? You remember Alien movie? I mean, like, it's a very old movie. I don't know if you know, everybody seems too young. There was this scene, the creature comes out.
Of the body, like.
And I thought, oh, neoliberal machine, with its techno overlords, have become mature enough, like powerful enough to get rid of the body, which is like rule of law, democracy, all these liberal. So it was lovely to see that. So as you said, it was revealed. Now we see it like with naked eye, who is running the show, who is the power, actual power, and so on. But then and yes, of course, we should push the leaders to regulate them and so on. But then, one, they are so powerful, these techno overlords and so on. And second, there is this, still the taboo of private property, capitalism, it's free market, you cannot say anything against it. So when I say, for instance, why don't we organize in Twitter and to beat the algorithm, and we push for nationalization of Twitter or X? People still are like, but that is, I don't know, communist? There is this very old fear that dates back to Cold War. It's still there, I think, and people do not want to touch that part of the story. I don't know, what you think?
Well, so what I do think we need to do is to open up our entire imagination of what it is we can do right now. So it was very interesting because only 2 weeks ago or so, there was an evening here in Amsterdam at a different venue with Ruha Benjamin. And she's an activist and academic, and she wrote a book, Imagination, a Manifesto. And she is urging everybody to be imaginative of a different world. It sort of builds on what you're talking about. When you accept where you are, there's space to dream. She cites Toni Morrison, who says, before you write, or before you think, dream a little. And so it's interesting because the whole angle of her approach is quite positive, right, to imagine. But I think we have to conclude that with regard to the tech bros, we have failed to imagine the worst. So we've also let our imagination, stay out, because we trusted their projection of reality, the claims that they made, the frames that they made, and everything. And so, I think with with a loss of, indeed, the shackles of what we can't touch, maybe capitalism is the limits within which we can operate. I think that too is being opened up right now. So in my book, I talk about, solutions that I believe are helpful to prevent the destruction of democracy because of the outsized power of tech companies. And I explicitly say, I have not limited myself to solutions that I think will be politically viable today, because then the book might as well end here, you know. We really have to allow ourselves to think about banning certain technologies or taking them over or, doing more radical interventions, but also of building different realities. So I think in the discussion about the power of tech and how to curb it, regulation is sort of in the forefront. It's Europe's own fault in many ways because it has actually looked to regulation so much. And it has not looked to the ability, the wealth, the creativity, and the possibility that we collectively have to build a different tech ecosystem. And why I'm excited now is that I think that kind of imagination, that we can actually build something better, is also on the table, being shaped. So I'm hopeful that actually, the challenges to the capitalist model or the surveillance capitalist model, as Zsuzsanna Zuboff puts it, that is underpinning the platforms that are destroying our democracies, can now be imagined and can be built and can be invested in. And for that too, we need governments to behave differently, because the irony of ironies is that a significant part of the wealth of Silicon Valley comes from our taxpayer money, because our governments are also major clients of these tech companies. And so if we wonder, well, where are the European alternatives? It's like, well, they're at the end of the bank account that you transfer to Silicon Valley. If we only start to redirect those resources to our own tech alternatives, help them scale, we will be able to live in a different reality, I'm convinced.
It makes all the sense, actually. If you know a bit about history of capitalism, it was invented in Rotterdam, in this country. So it makes sense if the alternative comes out from this country as well.
Well,
no, seriously.
We're not there yet.
No, I mean, this is the thing, in order to, if you want to think, imagine first, maybe before imagining, be bold first. We have to speak about these things, not only because we love democracy, we don't want to lose it, and this neoliberal, setup is making it impossible for democracies to function, because democracies, what is the biggest promise of democracy? It's equality. But then the reality we are living is a neoliberal reality, and equality doesn't make any sense. I'm like, it's like neoliberalism is canceling out the fundamental promise of democracy. So, but it's not only for democracy. We know that because of this system that we are living in, the entire planet will be extinct. We are going to be extinct. So yes, I mean, I hope we don't lose the planet before we lose our fears of, using certain words or imagining certain ideas. And I'll stop it there because I think you're one.
No, I'm thinking, what I'm curious about is that earlier you said the democratic leaders, I'm interested in them, and they let us dance into this. And I mean, we've had Meredith Whittaker here, the CEO of Signal, and we had this conversation with her as well. But I do wonder what you think. Do you think that the governments and the democratic leaders have always known the technology held so much power and it could also be used for evil? Or do you think that they don't really understand it at the same time?
I think us in Europe, us in the Netherlands, have leaned too heavily on the transatlantic relation and have accepted the promise of technology in an American style. And that American style is looking to the companies and trusting that they would provide secure technology, trusting that their technology would empower the unheard voices, would unlock the world's information, would connect everybody, would actually democratize the world. And there have been, important signs that this was a lie. but they have not been met with countervailing power. So when Ece says democracy is about equality, yes it is. It's also about representation. It's also about ensuring there are countervailing powers towards powers, that there are checks, balances, and that there's a limit to how much power any one entity, whether it's a government or a commercial actor or whoever else, can acquire. And because this phenomenon of the tech innovations has been seen through the lens of marvel, how incredible can this be, and the lens of markets, it has not been looked at through the lens of power sufficiently. And it's only now descending upon all of us that this power lens was actually the key factor. And if you look at the policies that have been adopted, the vast majority of them are trying to correct market excesses. Think about competition. Not a single company is allowed to become, so big, and so you need market instruments to balance that. Yeah, for example, to prevent monopolies or to prevent a killing of innovation, because the powerful companies can purchase all the smaller ones and so on. But we are still not doubling down on making the survival of democracy the core of why we intervene. And that is the plea that I make in the book. For example, if we borrow from antitrust competition law, there's a notion that says a company can be scrutinized when it has significant market power. But I make the case for intervening when a company has significant societal power. Because actually they are not on the same level, meaning there can be actors in the market that may have acquired significant market power, meaning that they should be scrutinized for antitrust concerns, but they may not impact democracy. Similarly, there can be smaller tech companies that have deep, aggressive, terrible impact on fundamental rights and freedoms. Think about spyware, which is one of the technologies that I describe quite elaborately, the kind of technology that can enter people's phones even without them having to make a single quote-unquote mistake, can access your contacts, your communications, your photos, turn on your camera, turn on your microphone. I mean, very, very aggressively invasive technology, which is anti-democratic. These small spyware companies would never meet the threshold of significant market power, but I think they're far past the threshold of significant societal power. So to make a long story short, I think what would be super helpful is if we elevate the survival of democracy to be, at least as important as the survival of fair competition, and then we can actually roll out fairly easily a whole bunch of measures that would actually double down on protecting democracy. And so, yes, one of the key problems is indeed that this lens of market power, economic lens on technology and on why it is a success, because if you think about the US government, if you look at its GDP now, and if you look at how much of GDP is actually directly related to the success of the big tech companies, through that lens, it is a quote-unquote success. But of course, that is not the full lens through which we, at least I make the case, should look at society, because there are so many more issues that need to be considered. And there, of course, the harms are rippling through our world like a tsunami.
You keep talking about lens, and I'm curious. I mean, you wrote a wonderful book, How to Lose a Country, and you use 7 steps. So if we use those 7 steps as a lens now to this conversation. So you have step 1, create a populist movement, humiliate common sense, undermine the moral authority of the elite, eliminate shame, weaponize language, exploit fear, and eliminate political alternatives. If we use that lens and now look at the conversation we're having, could you take us there, as in what step are we now as a society, and maybe,
like in Netherlands? No, in Europe. Well, people love this question, and there's this, like which step?
It's not chronological, right?
No, not at all, unfortunately. I wish that was easy. That would be so easy. While you were talking, I was thinking, I think it was in How to Lose a Country. And it wasn't clear when I was writing the book in 2019 or 18, whatever. Now it has become so clear. I was talking about the social media network that enabled Gezi uprising, or was used, or in, Tahrir, and I saw it in several places being used. And I wrote something like, we are not aware, like we'd like to imagine these places as agora, whereas they are not agora. Like this is not like a common space, that space that belongs to everyone. But those political events at the time made us think that this is our space. Twitter is our space. Facebook is our space, because if you remember, there was also the propaganda of it, like Facebook revolution in Iran, Twitter revolution in Tahrir, and so on. That was good PR, I think.
The online public square, remember?
Oh,
the
yeah,
online
that's the word
square.
I'm looking for.
Yep.
We always constantly think that we are on public square. And I said, we're not on public square, we're in someone's garden.
Yeah, someone's shopping mall.
Shopping mall. Actually, not garden, shopping mall. And one day, this garden shopping mall might be closed, and it happened much later. But then, people tend to disregard the fact that there is private ownership of this place, and that spirit, that sense was maybe intentionally created, as you said. Which step are we? I cannot tell, and I don't want to, because it's depressing. The thing is, the crucial step, I think, for Europe, well, I don't want to say it, but sometimes I think of United States. Europe is complicated because Europe is not one country at the end of the day. But then United States is always easier to talk about because it showed us, which I think we should give it to American people, because you said there is no enough reaction, which I agree absolutely. But then I also give it to them because the speed of things was unimaginable. And they have in United States, especially in the mainstream thinking, there is this idea that there is politics and there is life. There is market, there is politics, and now Americans are going through this incredibly radical transformation, and to finally understand that everything is political.
How do you see that?
Huh?
How do you see that transformation?
Because they are understanding that their lives are on the line, like literally their jobs are on the line. Probably better than me, Washington for the first 100 days were like walking zombies. Everybody was affected, and finally they understood that it's not just government, it's life itself. Politics is, and then they are also realizing that it's not only White House, it trickles down, and then people are changing. People are becoming minions of Trump and so transforming, which we have seen in Turkey for such a long time. So I think they are in an interesting step, and I think that would be step 4, which is the dismantling of judiciary mechanism, which is a very boring stuff that nobody wants to, because it's so details, boring, elaborate stuff. But actually, that's the crucial and very critical turn, and I think they're going through that now. Europe is not easy to talk about, yeah.
And are we at that step 4 because there are now consequences to what's
happening?
Yeah,
the judiciary is being bought, and it's been done openly now, like, judges, and, they're playing with that. So that is the important stuff. And all, when you speak about regulations, I also think about Europe, that these are the boring things that people do not want to know about, like, which committee is doing what in European Union. It's very elaborate, it's almost Kafkaesque. But then that boring stuff had to be studied, I think, and this unfortunately falls on us. All the citizens of Europe, although I'm not a citizen of Europe, but still.
Almost.
Very close.
How do you react to that as being part? You have been part of a European Parliament for 10 years? No, longer.
Yeah, 10 years. Well, I actually, I'm one of those people who thinks that the boring institutions are the pillars of what makes the whole fun stuff work. And we are often in situations where you don't know what you've got till it's gone, and I think that that's what the Americans are now appreciating as well. And I just wanted to come back to the importance of narrative, because we've talked about, you know, the stories that came out of Silicon Valley that were shared around the Arab uprisings, which is actually also where I begin in my book, because that's when I was just elected as a member of European Parliament. And it was such a powerful promise. And I don't even think that they were deliberately lying. I actually think that the companies at the time that were much smaller than they were today, led in different ways than many of them are today, like Twitter, I think, is a good example of that.
Yeah.
I actually think that the people in charge of those companies, the people who worked there, wanted it to be true. But they just did not, you know, if you sit in Silicon Valley, if you just created a company that has found investments of, what, 300 million, maybe $1 billion, the sun shines. Your idea as a 25, 20-year-old guy has gone through the roof. The whole world is looking at you. You're growing, you're hiring, you're earning money, you're going public. You feel very reinforced in your success, and the world looks good from that perspective. So they did not imagine, didn't study history, didn't ask human rights defenders, didn't go to Turkey, to understand that there could also be nefarious uses, you know. And so I think from genuinely believing in that promise, increasingly the cost of investing in understanding the harms and potentially taking ownership of them was just one that they broadly didn't invest in. They could have, but they didn't. I've talked to people inside tech companies, for example, around elections and the impact that social media platforms can have on shaping public opinion. And, you know, I would ask them about what they saw on the inside, because there's a fundamental lack of transparency into these private companies, which is one of the problems that I underline, because if you cannot, in the public interest, research what actually happens with algorithmic settings, with generative AI, then it's really hard to scrutinize and assess, one, what is the harm, two, what you can do about it. But I've heard people in these companies saying, oh, we deliberately didn't study X, Y, or Z, because if we studied it, we may have to take action on it, and we didn't want to. So then if you get asked, hey, what happened here and there, you can just say, oh, we don't know, because you didn't study it. So there was a deliberate choice not to double down on understanding potential downsides, potential harms and problems, and to continue with the narrative of, you know, opportunity and empowerment and freedom. And it's happening until today. Elon Musk, Donald Trump have a narrative of protecting freedom of expression, free speech, and it is very appealing to people. It's actually appealing to me, except that it's not true. The promises of freedom of expression by Trump and Musk are the biggest lies of this moment, because they are killing freedom of expression left, right, and center. But if you listen to what they say we protect free speech. If you look at what they do, they don't do any of that. And I think the social media platforms where everybody now gets information are perfect vehicles to spread these narratives. I'll give you another example. Donald Trump spent about 4 years between 2020 and 2024, changing the narrative around what happened on January 6th, an assault on American democracy, a violent attempt to overthrow the election outcome. I mean, it's a very serious event. And he curated the change to making this into a day of love. A day of love. And who were big helpers here? The tech platforms. Because YouTube and Meta, for example, somewhere a year and a half or so before the 2024 elections, changed their corporate policies to no longer moderate, so filter out, content with lies about the elections. So after January 6th, because it had been such a dramatic, you know, dangerous event for American democracy, finally the tech companies started to take a little bit more responsibility, and they said, okay, lies about the election we're not going to accept. We want factual information about the elections to be shared. And then after a bit of time, probably reading the tea leaves about where American politics would go, they said, well, you know, this is now far behind us, the 2020 election. It's, you know, it's been 2.5 years, so we're no longer going to moderate for this. And of course, we now know that the notion that stop the steal, that Biden had not been legitimately elected to be president, was key key for Donald Trump to rally his base.
It was a new narrative, right?
Super important, but he crafted it very cleverly. But the platforms, not only were they the platforms of spreading the information so that it would reach people, they were also enablers of this message by making a choice to facilitate it. And what we don't know is the role that the algorithmic settings played. We still don't know. So I think everybody who spent some time on formerly Twitter and X sees that it's a dramatically different place, that it used to be a place where you could see the Gezi Park demonstrations unfold in real time, and now you get all these crazy life hack advices about, eating protein and going to the gym at 6 in the morning and everything, but also facilitating this fascist narrative.
No, invisibility, For some reason, I have 2.6 million followers on Twitter. And
are you still on Twitter now?
Yes, I am, because I don't believe in going from places until I am kicked out.
You're holding
because
the line.
I was there before
line,
Elon Musk, to be absolutely clear. They make it invisible. That's the thing against freedom of expression. They don't censor you. They just make you invisible.
Yeah, the shadow banning.
Yeah. Now only 15,000 people see me. I was going to ask you about the narrative. They're setting the narrative, absolutely. They have the power to do that. And what, in the beginning I said ultimate shade of black. It was like that, being with these guys. What made me feel like I'm looking at ultimate black was that I saw the moral void. First of all, ignorance, as you very well put. Ignorance is a factor. I mean, like the ignorance, the immense, intense ignorance was mind-boggling, but also the moral void. And fascism in the past, like it, hate it, whatever, it had an ideal. Like Übermensch, whatever, some sort of crazy shit, but then it had an ideology, theory, and so on. So-called, all these so-called things. But then they talk about, when they talk about this tech revolution, or like whatever thing, tech bros, people say that they believe in dark enlightenment. Really, I cannot get my head around it because there is no content there, actually. So it is a void, like intellectual, moral void that we are looking at, and that makes me feel like I am looking at the ultimate shade of black, because we are coming from this sort of old school idea that we are going to be in a debate, ideas, and we are going to clash. No. I understood that there is no clash. There, sort of, maybe on some level.
No,
but
I actually think there is a deeply anti-democratic ideology. Because, for example, some of the thinkers behind the tech billionaires that are funding Trump and supporting him, they want to get rid of government institutions as they exist. I mean, we've seen Doge take a pretty good stab at achieving that. But they have a vision of creating states like startups. So we're going to run society like a company, and there's going to be a CEO king. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
No, like in the film Mountainhead. No, I
yeah,
seriously,
sure, yeah, all that stuff.
Probably many people watch that as like a funny thing, like absurd. No, it's real, like, exactly like that. Because I heard someone from these tech bros said, oh, since we're, among us, I'll tell you, we're going to make United States Argentina, talking about,
exactly.
referring to
crypto
Milei.
and everything. That's the dream. So the dream is to replace the order that came before. So I think why a lot of people still struggle to understand what the Trump administration truly represents is because they see what they're doing, like a trade war, for example, or a reform of the government within the parameters of the competition of politics. Okay, we had Obama and now we have Trump. They're very, very different. Okay, but actually what the Trump administration, with the help of these crypto and tech VCs and entrepreneurs are trying to do is change the rules of the game. So they're not playing in the same parameters of the field. They're not keeping score by the same rules. And we are still not there. I mean, I was one of those niche nerds that used to do trade policy when I was in the European Parliament. And so from time to time, I get a question now when we talk about Trump, like, oh, what should Europe do with regard to the trade rules? And the thing is, if you try to understand it in the traditional trade dynamics, you would make a completely different choice than looking at it, as you said exactly, everything is political. So a trade measure is not a trade measure, but it's a political signal, and I think the answer should be political as well.
Absolutely.
And I'm afraid that the EU and its leaders have not fully concluded what they're dealing with, because I think, again, it's beyond what people can imagine could be an agenda. Because it is so radical.
Is it beyond, or people, because this is something I noticed about humanity in general when I was working on today's fascism. There is this almost clinical level obsession with visual thinking. And I can just summarize it like, oh, it cannot be that bad.
Sure, yeah.
So it's not even denial. It is just completely like illusioning yourself with this idea that it cannot be that bad. And, they don't listen to things sometimes. They don't intentionally go deaf, because Trump said that this is the last election. He said it. And then everybody pretends that it didn't happen, that there will be election. He's another president, just another president. It's lovely to talk about Trump, but yeah. He made it so easy for us. He made it so clear. So yeah, I'm kind of thankful to him. So we know where the world will go. And I know that there are many ideas. You have written this amazing book. But I wonder if there is the political will. And more importantly, the political will requires the support of the people and also to show the courage, to do that. And I wonder if there will be political will.
Yeah, I want to move on to the next section because we're going to talk about solutions and what can we do now, so that is a good link. But before we do so, I want to go back to one thing you said about the promises and about the promises of Silicon Valley and the tech bros, as I call them. Do you think those promises were ever honest, or were they always a myth? And can we go back to those promises?
Look, the internet is an incredible invention. It is absolutely phenomenal. But what the commercial vision is a different one from what the technological or the ideological vision is. And there are, of course, different kinds of people. So there were pioneers in Silicon Valley. Many of them were deeply skeptical of power, including state power. So a lot of them saw technology as a solution against an overly powerful state. So think about encryption towards greater protection of privacy. Because a lot of people in these pioneering years, they understood that with new technological inventions, for example, for military uses, there would also be a threat to civil liberties. And so they started to use technology to protect civil liberties. So obviously Silicon Valley is not one thing, and the pioneers of Silicon Valley are not one thing. But in talking about narrative or framing, which is something I think we really need to understand much better in order to fight it, is the narrative of what the internet means for people was abused to justify the behavior of companies. So let me give you an example. When I was a member of the European Parliament, literally whenever there was a legislative proposal that sought to curb one harm or abuse of power by tech companies, they would frame it as Europe is going to destroy the internet. And everybody's like, whoa, yeah, because everybody's like, no, don't take away our internet. We love the internet. Well, actually, what was going to happen was that, a handful of companies were going to not be allowed to use certain, data collection methods, or were going to have to pay for copyrighted materials or what have you.
Taking away the internet is the same as taking away the freedom of speech, then?
Well, it's just everything that actually is beautiful, but they were pretending that Google, Facebook, Amazon, that these companies were the internet. Well, of course they're not. And I think that this is where there's still a lot of confusion. I mean, it is now the portal through which the majority of people in the world experience the internet. But they are not the internet itself. They've actually sort of colonized it, if that's a word that we can still use today. I want to be very mindful of any comparison. But they've kind of, occupied that internet and used the narrative of being the internet in a very clever way. The same with the framing around the role of regulation. I think one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful lobbying frame coming out of Silicon Valley has been regulation stifles innovation. Meaning if you have rules, you're not going to be innovative. And to the point that up until today, a number of people that may be lawmakers are first going to be on the defensive and say, no, I don't want to stifle innovation. That is not what I'm talking about here. I just want to make sure that, you know, we protect our public debate or teenagers from, you know, addictive harms or other stuff that, you know, may merit some guardrails in the digital world. But our understanding of what technology is and whose interests are being served by which steps is heavily framed by the tech bros, the tech entrepreneurs and wealthy leaders. And that is happening until today in many ways. So everybody understands that politicians are lobbied, but it's also through funding civil society, funding academics, representing certain interests in standard-setting bodies at the United Nations, you know, setting up civil society organizations. So you may hear an activist, but the activist is actually, you know, spreading a narrative that benefits one or the other tech company. It's a very complex ecosystem of influencing, and there's too little, and I think this is something we can easily fix, too little focus on independent, non-partial information informing decision makers about technology. So one of the solutions I propose in my book, every parliament has a legal service, because guess what? Most parliamentarians are not lawyers, but they actually have to write law. I've been in that position. It's hard. You want to create some change, but you don't know exactly whether you're correct from a legal point of view. And so then, hooray, here's the legal service. You bring your draft. They go with a red pen. They give you advice. It gets better. And then a law can actually survive, because otherwise a law would be challenged and, you know, killed by the first challenge. Why not have such a tech service in parliamentary bodies where you have independent experts, would also be good for the talent pipeline, informing the lawmakers that if they want to change something about technology, these people can help them, you know, understand how the business model works, how you might change it. If your intention is to achieve X, then you have to do Y. These are things that I think we have to cater for, because if we don't organize it, then all the commercially informed framing and narrative now about AI, all the hype, you know, it's so dominant. Where are we getting independent information? It's nearly impossible.
Would you like to react?
Yeah, this AI thing. I was in Rome, and it was anyway, you know, important, prominent intellectuals and so on, and there were also very distinguished guests from Vatican. And these were, let's say, friends and supporters of Pope Francis, late Pope Francis. So I noticed that, you know, Vatican is more alert than any of us when it comes to job loss to AI.
Why?
This AI stuff is so dark. I don't want to even talk about it, but like the guys who are kind of doing it, it's like imagining a unhuman future. So they don't really, they're not against democracy. They're not against people who are talking about this democracy, or they're not against political movements. They just dismiss, they don't even dismiss it. We are just non-existent. And I understood, like, you know, oh, all these human masses, it's not their problem. They're thinking and talking in a different universe, sort of in this iPhone slick universe. It's like film Elysium, not to be too blunt, but yeah. Anyway, and I thought we need unprecedented alliances, like, you know, with religious people, with, you know, socialists, with, you know, European Union institutions and so on. Because in 2 years' time, we're going to be living in an absolutely different world. You would know it far better than me, from what I've read. And we are, you know, if we don't do these things, we're going to be facing reality collapse, which is a whole different level of, you know, another level of darkness, so to speak, because we will not know what is real. That's why I keep telling, friendships are important. It's not only because they're lovely, but because, very soon we might, the only proof that we are real will be our friends, because nothing will be real, kind of. We will be living in a quite interesting universe. So, unfortunately, we will have to radicalize, I think. Even the very, European Union people will have to radicalize a little bit more. I think our game doesn't match up. We have to game up a little bit, and then people will have to be less proper, because what's coming towards us is quite horrible. And I'm not sure everybody understands this in European Union and in the, in these departments that has to do the regulations, or, politicians in general. Those people probably understand, but politicians in general, I don't think they understand what's going to happen, because as you said, the independent information is almost impossible about AI.
Already, yeah.
And we don't know who is making the decisions, really. We don't know if someone is making a decision, to be honest. So,
well, right now, I think we should still consider this technology as something man-made, and we should hold people accountable. I mean, the irony of ironies is when you talked about the Vatican first, I smiled because I thought the bishops and the priests themselves thought that they might be out of a job soon.
No,
because
this is what I meant.
Yeah, because of course the idea of seeking answers, quite literally.
3 of my friends are using ChatGPT as a therapist.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you go.
Yeah. No, seriously, and this is a real problem. And I asked ChatGPT, what do you think when people use you as a therapist? You know what ChatGPT said? Because I don't judge them. Mm-hmm. So this means that there are humans who are afraid of being judged by a therapist. Then I asked ChatGPT.
And people are lonely already, so
exactly. And then, okay, this is nice. I have to tell this. And I said,
after this, we still have to do the speech. So let's keep it short.
I'm also happy to skip it and just keep talking.
No.
Honestly,
if you want that.
I mean, it's up to you, but I think our conversation is
the 3 top topics.
Let's do that.
I asked, what is the the most shared common whatever problem that people bring up to you? It's self-worth.
Yeah.
So we are feeding this machine with the most embarrassing secrets of humankind, and it's learning about us, actually. And we don't know, and you said in the beginning, people are having fun with it. In Turkey, it's treated as the village fool, like they're doing this, you see, it did this, it did that. Oh my God, it's not a toy.
But actually people are also seduced to use it in the way that they want to see. So what I'm seeing a lot on Platform X is that they use Grok, the AI that Elon Musk runs there, to challenge Elon Musk. Because then they think it may have authoritative value to convince Elon Musk himself. It's like, haha, but look at what your own AI is saying. But when you were talking about, we're going to have challenges of verifying that we're human, you're absolutely right. And guess who's investing in a tool to do that? Sam Altman. It's his business now. And so it started in developing economies, which is very cynical, actually, when you think about it. So this company that used to be called WorldCoin, that Sam Altman, who also founded OpenAI, set up. They have an orb. It looks like it's a globe kind of thing with a camera in it, and it invites people to look into it with their iris. So it records the biometric information for identification purposes, and then it offers these people who are often dirt poor cryptocurrency. And the equivalent value is, I don't know, like $30 or something. So for poor people, this is a lot of money, but except that they can't spend it anywhere. They just have like X amount of crypto now for sharing their iris scan. But this company has now kind of been repurposed, and the whole idea is that it's going to be used to verify that you're human in a time where humans are, confused for synthetically generated content, etc. So, the things that we should think about as the most fundamental to our self-determination, to our freedom, our agency, our rights, our existence, really, are already commodified before we understand what's happening to us. And then you have platforms like Reddit, for example, which are really quite popular and used by many people who are probably going to embrace this, human verification service to see whether their users are human. So there's a lot of dystopian qualities to the world that we're in, and I agree that it's hard for people to grasp what's happening, and then to act to protect what's should not be disrupted.
The thing is, when I wrote this book, How to Lose a Country, I went around the world like a Cassandra, like, it's coming to you, you're going to suffer as well. Fascism is global, here are the patterns, and so on. And then people want a solution, of course, like, when you terrify them, they say like, so what is it, where is the way out? And many people I noticed, realized that they want a 7 steps from democracy to fascism.
Ready-made.
So no, you want this book, 7 steps from fascism to democracy. I wish that was easy. What I noticed is what I understood by, through thinking and through seeing things, that you cannot change the damage, or you cannot reverse the damage of fascism only through strictly political tools. We need a moral transformation to do that. And I keep on talking about this moral void, because like cloud fascism, the moral void that we are witnessing should actually inspire us to do the exact opposite. Like, what are these guys doing? They're imagining an unhuman future. So we have to imagine a radically human future. What are these guys doing? They don't believe in anything. We have to believe in each other. Like, we have to believe in ourselves. What are they doing? They are radically cynicist. So we have to be radically naive.
But how?
I'm serious about this, because everyone in this room, probably including me, is so afraid of appearing as naive.
But what does that look like? What do you do then if you want to appear naive?
Like something like, but then don't you think that what's happening in Gaza is inhumane?
So ask questions as well.
No. I mean, saying this outrage, not a great example, but I just wanted to say Gaza for no reason. So yeah, showing emotion and, wanting all these fragile, vulnerable, humane things. We are so afraid of appearing naive. Anyway, so we have to be opposite. And this, we need regulations, we need everything, but then we really need a radical moral transformation. We don't care about money. We should be able to say this. I know these are extremely, utopic things, but then yes, exactly for this reason I'm saying we shouldn't be afraid of appearing naive. This is a real problem. So, and this change, or getting back our democracies, getting back our dignity, to be honest, not, should go through this moral transformation, and we shouldn't be afraid of asking the most stupid questions, such as can it be possible to live without money? It should be discussed. We should go back to that, not naivete, but clarity, moral clarity, so to speak.
But wait, since we're not doing the speech, I do have a question about, because I want to go a bit towards solutions, because I have to keep an eye on the time, and I was expecting, and I was thinking you would say something in an article in NRC. Someone said that you said that we should do the Netherlands first approach. And I was also curious about that, and also curious how you would listen to that. What did you mean by that, if you want to make it more concrete?
Well, I actually said it was kind of amusing, because I was asked to speak before the Parliamentary Committee on Digitization, and I think there were 2 or 3 members. One of them was with the Party for Freedom, talk about narrative, the far-right party. I sort of joked, which is always tricky, but I said, dare I say it, we need a Europe first approach, because I would emphasize the need to work together on a European level. But building on what you just said in terms of, taking a different approach, I agree, but I think we also need to make it very concrete that we build different technology, because people want to use AI. But it doesn't have to be the AI that platforms all of us into, the next data-hungry, freedom eliminating kind of model. We can build AI that's decentralized, that actually allows you to keep your intellectual property, that empowers you to do things that you want to do with it, rather than make you a sort of, dependent on the business model and takes away your data and commodifies it, etc.
We in Europe, we in the US, who's we?
We in Europe, I'm happy if Americans want to build different tech as well, but the problem of Americans now is, of course, that they are all subjects of the US administration. Yeah. And so that is what makes this moment so dangerous. This was something I was going to briefly highlight in my remarks, because we are, in the Netherlands and in Europe, nearly completely dependent on US tech. Nearly completely. Like 100% of the municipalities use Microsoft, for example. And that's one thing, not good for the economy, not good for our innovative capabilities and so on. But we sort of, sleepwalked into it thinking that American tech is reliable, that we are on the same page, we share the same principles and values, so, we're all part of the same Western family. But we are no longer. It's not by choice, but Trump has actually said, you know what, the transatlantic relation, no more, forget about it. And we have a hard time digesting it here, because everybody alive today has grown up in this sort of paradigm of the West, America, whatever you think about it, like my parents' generation were in the streets demonstrating against the war in Vietnam, but they were also the generation that was liberated by the Americans. The warplanes, fighting Nazism, flying over their heads when they were born. It's very real. That relationship is over. And the problem in Europe is people have not fully accepted that yet, and therefore are not drawing the consequences of this combination of not only losing the transatlantic relation, but having a potentially, and sometimes actually tangibly, hostile America vis-a-vis Europe. Yeah. And we just had the NATO summit here. I don't know if you followed any of it. It was pretty disgusting.
Yeah, I saw the disgusting part.
No, it was awful.
The daddy video you're talking about?
Among others.
This is becoming too real, by the way. I'm going to smoke a cigarette.
If you want to do something practical, by all means. I think smoking may not be the best one. But it was pretty disgusting, because everybody was sucking up to Trump in a sort of theatrical, and I think, losing of dignity kind of way. I mean, we know what this administration stands for. And I was trying to compare it to, when a hostile head of state was visiting. And I remember that Putin visited the Netherlands. And gosh, was this city proud. It put up rainbow flags all over the city. It was like, you know what, Putin? We love LGBTQI rights, and you should know it. I have no idea where the guy slept. Maybe he was in Hermitage or something, with a nice Russian link.
Not with the king, at least.
Not with the king and the queen. But what was also really bad,
It's a bizarre thought.
But what's the difference between Putin and Trump then in this whole scenario, in the narrative that we're talking about?
The narrative is different because we treat the guy very differently, and because there's still nostalgia. Because
the American dream nostalgia as well.
No, of the transatlantic relation. So what I think all of this sliminess that we have been witness to over the past couple of days is a witness of, is that we have not yet accepted how dramatically different this administration is. On the one hand, we have, because if we wouldn't be so afraid, we wouldn't be doing all these dances around him, hoping to appease him, hoping to not anger him, hoping to, have him stay calm. But coming back to tech, what the combination of this near 100% dependence on US tech means, combined with a United States that is at least unreliable and at worst hostile, an Elon Musk, who is a key advisor to the US president, that is undermining the German elections, it's not an accident. Like, Trump is fine with that. If Trump wouldn't have wanted that, he would have reined in his attack dog. It's probably the opposite. It's probably some kind of experiment in real time of what they can do with their power. It's not a secret what they're doing, but we are not attaching the consequences. But some people are appreciating what's happening, so I wanted to give a hopeful perspective, is that I think, and this is where Ece's remarks and mine really touch the most strongly, is that we have to accept the reality as it is and start acting upon it. No time for nostalgia, no time for sort of keeping on to the little crumbs of the transatlantic relation that we once, thought was valuable. Where I think there's the opening to do things differently is to build different tech and to grow European alternatives. And it's already happening, which shows, City of Copenhagen, for example, City of Amsterdam is talking about tech sovereignty. It's starting, and what is most important about it is that it shows that it's possible. Because one of the narratives that we're up against is that we're already too late. We're not having Q&A tonight, but maybe one of you, as I notice typically in discussions and Q&A about this topic, has on their mind, oh, there is. Okay, well, maybe the question will then come, but now let me ask it, put it on the table already. Oftentimes people ask, are we not too late? Yeah. Can we still take a different approach?
But that's a very nihilistic question, because then we can just say, never mind.
Well, but it's a real feeling that people have. Yeah. And I think it is also not an accident that there's the narrative that we don't have a choice, because a lot of the tech companies want us to believe that we don't have a choice because our current choice is them. But why it's important that we see cities transitioning away from US dependence with all the unreliability and risk also on the level of national security and democracy that comes along with it to European alternatives is that it allows us to build that different future. It allows us to think about one tech that's at least in our jurisdiction, which is a difference, which should make it more valuable and should allow governments to use procurement to elevate its relevance, send a signal to markets, bring investors to Europe, and it can really create a flywheel. But we shouldn't do this in a way that copies Silicon Valley because we want the same. We should do it because we are self-confident that as Europeans, we are capable of building a different tech future. And this has a lot to do with the moral choices that you talk about and with, being bold and radical, and I fully agree. But I think it should go beyond sort of, imagining taking the opposite pole position, but really thinking about how can we build that society in a different way. And through technology, actually, the cool thing is you can really do it. You can really build incredible alternatives.
But not to be the capitalist at this table, but you need money to do that. And we had a conversation here with Constantijn van Oranje-Nassau, who's the leader of TechLeap, and Loke Morel, and she was saying, well, a lot of industry technological startups come to me and say, hey, can you help me get some money in Europe and find it for me? And then a lot of times it doesn't work, and then they go to the US and they say, yes, here is 100,000 euros or dollars.
Well,
good
maybe
luck.
More like 100 million, but yes, indeed.
Yeah.
No. So the problem is yes, there's an enormous magnetic appeal to getting that venture capital that's much more risk tolerant, because VC venture capitalist companies, they may invest in 100 companies, and if one or two of them become the next Googles, then it doesn't matter that the 98 of them failed and burned somewhere in the corner. And indeed, access to capital should be easier in Europe, and I think it's being worked on. But why there's an opening now? Talented Europeans that work in the US are not always happy to continue working there. Last week, I read something that even blew my mind, and I really thought I'd seen it all. Staffers of OpenAI, Meta, and Palantir are now enlisted in the US Army. They have joined the US Army, okay? So
without them knowing, or?
No, deliberately.
Like they wanted to be in
press release, we are joining.
But wait, as a soldier or as a tech
special
AI?
rank?
Okay.
And the story is we're going to help the army innovate, but of course, an army is an army. So it's an alignment with state interests. And so what we see more and more, and it's no longer invisible, is this alignment. And Europeans who work there are becoming increasingly uncomfortable, and guess what? Maybe they can't even stay there because of visa issues, because Trump hates foreigners, also the white ones. And so there's an opening, because we can actually bring back European talent, we can actually bring over American talent. In the academic world, people are really afraid, unsafe. Cannot do their research in a free way, cannot say what they want to say, are not getting funding for their research. And this is anything from medical research to democracy research. It is very serious because it, goes very fast. And so, yes, this is all happening. And access to capital is a real problem. But if we are clever in using the opening that is happening now, we can completely turn around this equation. And this is not because I want to find a glimmer of hope. It's actually a momentum that we have to use. And I think it's possible. You know, I've talked to Europeans who've spent half of their lives, earned millions of dollars in the United States, but were like, no longer, thank you. And they're setting up investment funds to strengthen European, tech ecosystems to help there. But we do need public leaders, political leaders, to be on board, to prioritize this. I mean, you know, we have Trumpian politics in our country. Who knows what the next elections are going to bring, but let's hope it's something better than what we've just seen. And it gives us another opportunity to say, hey, the Netherlands, you know, we're quite well connected in the tech domain. We can be the drivers of this change. We can develop more public interest tech in our country. Look at what's happening in Waag Society. Last time I sat at this table at this position in your seat was Marleen Sticker, a brilliant woman who used to be a hacker who does a lot in public interest tech, a public stack. I mean, the ideas are there, the talent is there, you know what, the money is even there, but we are choosing to transfer it to Silicon Valley instead of investing it into our own companies. Can you imagine how much money we can spend if we no longer spend it there? We will probably, I'll dare put a good bottle of wine on it in a bet right now, okay, save money by investing in European companies.
Yeah.
How do you listen to that? Hope?
No, I'm not. Well, I don't believe in the word hope.
No.
But that's a long story. Not long story, I'll tell you. I'll be like, it's all connected, what I'm saying. By the way, I didn't say let's do the opposite, but then we can actually, by thinking the opposite, we can list our values that we will operate on, which is in together, like 10 values. And those 10 values actually will be very necessary when these things are done, because it wasn't a capitalist question you asked, but it was, I think there was an assumption in that question, and that assumption comes from the fundamental definition of human in neoliberalism. You know, it says, the system we're living in, it says that we are humans, we are selfish, self-centered bastards. We operate for profit, and in order to survive, we step on each other, and then we never do anything for each other unless there is an interest. That is the definition of neoliberalism, which is exactly the opposite of the reality. Humans are prone to sacrifice themselves if there is a meaning to it, for each other or for a cause and so on. This is something that European politicians did not understand for a very long time. They think that all this is a game, and they don't understand that for Trump or for Erdogan, for such leaders, people see, they sacrifice themselves because they see a meaning. You might not like that meaning, but they see a meaning. And that goes beyond they are cynical. It's another story, but they are assuming, these people are assuming that they are going beyond the cynicism of system by being a part of greatness, something that many people did not understand, and we lost a lot of time. They thought they were deplorables. Anyway, that's a long story, but the fundamental definition of neoliberalism makes us think that only if we can, of course, I want these people to be paid, obviously, but then it's not only money. People can do things just for the sake of it as well, just for revenge, just because not revenge, but they believe in certain values. All these talents, and I know that there are many people suffering in these companies, like, really morally and psychologically suffering, because they cannot anymore sustain this meaninglessness in their lives. Because meaninglessness, and probably all of you know from our lives, meaninglessness is the most exhausting thing in our lives. And, these people, of course, can come back to Europe, but then Europe as well should think about morality more often. Because after Gaza, I think it would be very, very hard to convince the rest of the world that, there are some moral values here. You asked me where Europe is, and I didn't want to tell about it because I'm living in Germany. Yeah. Europe is in the step of losing shame. And I think It is a very, very important step. It's not, thank you. It's not very visible, but it is something irreversible once it's done. So really, I mean, like when I say we have to be more radical, we have to rethink everything. I really mean it. I really mean like the central values. What do we really believe in? Now, let's be real about this. You know, this, you know, fraternité, liberté, fraternité, égalité.
Égalité.
Not the right order.
Okay.
But fraternité, I think, should be first anyway. That's laissez-faire, laissez-passer has swallowed up that one. And, you know, and nobody believes when a European leader, not really believes when a European leader talks about democracy anymore. I mean, like, not after Gaza. So really, I mean, like, we have to be radical in that sense, I think.
But so I fully agree with you, but the reason why
I'm
I've
not telling you against
No,
it,
I know that, but
you
I
know.
think we need to also, you know, keep looking for avenues of change. And you said, I don't believe in hope, and I think that we do have reason for hope, and that the political arena is one where ideas are contested, you know. And we in this country, for what it's worth, have seen the biggest demonstrations in decades trying to change the policies of our government on Gaza. Now, obviously, that's not enough, but it's also not nothing.
No, when I think of Europe, I think of those people. I'm not thinking about, you know, head of Munich Security Conference crying because NATO is no longer, or, you know, NATO NATO meeting. Not that one. I'm thinking about those people who are, you know, crying on the streets, screaming on the streets. That is Europe. That is what human can be, should be, and what human is, actually, and what European is. I want to think like that. Yeah.
But then for everyone, the last question as well, before we go to the Q&A. For everyone in the audience, we started with anger, with defeat. We're not ending on hope, I promise. But what can we do? We talked about demonstrating. What can people do here to maybe set change, or at least, you know, start a revolution maybe, or...
You see, I'm cynical about it.
Yeah.
First of all, drop the cynicism like I did right now. Drop it. It's not funny. We shouldn't be laughing about these things. You know, this is something I learned from the Vatican people. When they talk about human love, they don't go human love. They mean it. This is important. We lost that, like as people who think about politics. And when somebody says revolution, we go, oh, revolution. We should drop this, and you know, sometimes I still do it with the fear of appearing naive.
But you just said we should be naive.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I didn't say we should be naive, but we shouldn't be afraid of appearing naive. That's two different things. But you know, seriously, you know, when we say these words, we will have to be courageous enough to be serious about them, like not smirk, not be ironic, not do quote unquote. You know, when we say revolution, we mean revolution. Then we might become dangerous. Then people might listen to us.
Yeah.
Listen, as in like, I'm talking about the decision makers.
Yeah.
We are, when I said we are defeated, we don't matter. I mean, we're not dangerous anymore. We should be dangerous. Not in the sense like, you know, oh, this sounds like, let's go and, yeah. I don't mean that. I am non-violent. But still, our words should be dangerous, I think.
Marietje?
Well, I mean, you said we started with, you know, accepting that we have fascism with anger, but I also started with saying we need to hold the line.
Yeah.
And I also started by saying I'm energized. And I think that progressives are challenged in many ways these days, but also by the fact that we have to reorient in our agendas, meaning let's go for revolution, but let's also preserve what we don't want to lose. And why is that disorienting? Because progressives for the longest time have had slogans like excited about the future, looking forward to progress, you know, the future is better than the past, more rights for more people. This is what, you know, was sort of the North Star. And we are now in a situation where we should be happy if we do not lose more. sustainability goals off the table. Companies in this country too are like, oh well, we don't have to anymore because of Trump, so we're not going to anymore. Women's rights, obviously a big problem. Democratic rights, fundamental freedoms, human rights, human dignity. So many things are rolled back instead of pushed forward, and it disorients progressive people. So I think the notion of holding the line is actually a very good one, because if we are capable of not losing more, we're winning. Because we have to reverse the tide. We have to reverse the tide before it can get better. And so it means that we have to at least not lose more. And so everybody can get involved, and I'm sure people are here because they're, involved beyond the average of this country. But I still think that there are things people can do. Online activism. Posting solidarity with Gaza, clicking like on a message that somebody says about something else, pro-Ukraine or pro the arts or against dictators or what have you, is good, but it's not the best democratic act you can do. So join a political party, vote, get more people to vote, buy media, newspapers, so that journalists can survive. Think about who's vulnerable. Think about people like, refugees in this country who are being stigmatized, people of ethnic minorities that are being discriminated, and try to see if you can do a little bit of something extra for someone who's marginalized. Artists are obviously in a difficult position now. Higher education is under pressure. So there are so many things that you can do that fits your beliefs, because, I'm hopeful that there's a variety of ideas that people have in this room. But the most important thing is to stay involved, to not turn away, to not feel like change is not possible, to just feel like this is happening to us and we just have to undergo it. But I think this is a message that here is pretty easy to digest, but it's about making that circle larger and about staying human, indeed. I mean, I also think that the online platforms have led to a space where respectful disagreement just doesn't exist anymore. People are just shouting, horrific things at each other because it's inconsequential. You don't have to look each other in the eye. In fact, maybe you get more likes and it's cool and your message goes viral because you were so bold and obnoxious. And so I think keeping a space where we can have heated debates, but where it's respectful and where we can actually appreciate that having different opinions is not a win or lose game. It's a sort of normal thing to do in a democracy. So, there's 1,000 things that we can do. And also you can go off of US tech. Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you. So we have time for 2 questions. Yeah, at least I'll be honest. I'll hold it, it's fine.
Oh, perfect. Hi there, thank you so much for this amazing debate. I had a quick question so the question is, can democratic values be a priority in a capitalist system? We've heard about this, and you've also mentioned, for example, the survival of democracy is a key value. But is that even possible in a capitalist system where profitability is priority always? And if so, I mean, what tools do we use? We heard about revolution. We heard about, different kind of voting matrices, right? But what about financial matrices? Like, we live in a capitalist society where you see the shareholders only looking at the financial matrices. That is the reality we live in today. How do we alter that?
Yeah, thanks.
Lovely tone of voice to begin with, like mine. This is why I talked about, capitalism or neoliberalism, is swallowing up democracy because it's canceling out. They have absolutely contradictory fundamental promises. So in order to regulate, which is the horrible word for real hardcore capitalists, we need regulations. We had these regulations until 1970s. And then, people remember the, near history of capitalism completely wrong because they are taught in that way. It didn't happen like at the end of 1970s. All of a sudden, everything went berserk, and there was this, absolutely unregulated free market economy just because. No, it didn't happen like that. There were military coups, like in my country, for that country to go into absolutely free market economy. All the third world countries, many third world countries, or the non-allied countries, look it up if you don't know it, if you're too young to know it, they were trying to, you know, stay in the regulated part of the capitalism. Okay, long story short, in Britain, it happened by, you know, crushing the labor movement. In France, like that. In Italy, brutally crushing of labor and so on. So we ended up here in a place where, like, you know, we are not even allowed to think about regulations because it's a taboo word. So we have to bring it onto the table, but then how do you do it? There should be a political will to do it. And so how does that political will? So somebody comes up and talks about revolution. So I'm opening the bet from revolution. And there are, like, you know, I don't know how many of us, like 100 people, we're saying revolution. And then we can sit at the negotiating table so that they can perhaps accept like a little bit of regulation. So it's not, you know, I just want to raise the hand of people of your
I'm going to ask you to keep the answers a bit shorter. Sorry.
That was my answer.
It's wonderful. Did you want to respond, Marietje?
No, it's okay.
Is there another question?
I'm very curious. You mentioned, Marietje, earlier a little bit. Sort of, we have to support we have to organize political parties, join political parties, support journalists, and so forth. Build our own tech. But in some ways, I have the feeling that this is exactly what led us to this position here. The media essentially failed us. The political parties have not offered any alternatives, and so really, my question is: can that really be the solution to kind of do more of the same? In some ways, it would seem to me, but maybe, you know. Maybe you would say have a different perspective on that.
Thank you. Well, I think there's a lot we can say about this country to criticize, but not that there is not a wide variety of choices of political parties that actually have entirely different visions for our society. Non-capitalist, you know, animals before humans. You know, quite radical, actually. A lot of variety. Maybe it's the problem that we have too many parties, but I think actually that there are different visions that you can actually align behind in a variety of ways. You know, the Netherlands is very vibrant with media as well, of different kinds. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm not sure I agree with you. But if you don't appreciate what you're seeing, then one way to get involved is to actually join and change. And you will find, that was one of the surprises I had when I joined a political party. How few people are members, first of all, and then how few people within political parties are active and setting the agenda. It's actually not difficult to enter to a position of real influence on the party program, on, you know, convenings with like-minded people to set the agenda, to invite guests, to think of new ideas. And again, let me stress that too. This moment of opening that we're living in, you know, will be attempted to be captured by many forces. You know, this can go in a variety of directions still. And so it's even more important to get involved. And I can get excited about very radical change, but I'm also worried about destroying more of what I don't want to see destroyed, you know? So I'm more conservative, apparently, than Ece, which is funny because I never would have thought that, but...
Why?
Well, because you are, you know, like, revolution and things like that.
This is the first time I say this out loud, by the way. This is the first instance.
No, but I think
seriously,
it's exciting.
It's so hard for me to preach. Let's not be cynical about words. But then I am still cynical when I say revolution.
Yeah.
I said revolution, so funny. But anyway, so this is the first time it was for you.
Well, no, but I think it's actually very exciting. But there's also
in order to get where you want to get, I'm raising the hand from here.
Yes, I get it. You're trying to open the space
further.
further.
A little bit dangerous, so they take us seriously.
Well, and to dare to ask more, and I think that that's a really good approach. But it also means that you are at the table, you know, that you are involved. And I think one of the risks of this moment for just individuals, and I think we're all struggling with it, is not to feel sort of numb, just be like, where do we start? If I ask my American friends why there's not more mass protest and mass action, it's because they're like, well, where do we begin? My livelihood is on the line. My children, if they're part of the queer community, are under pressure. Maybe a partner or a colleague or a friend who's an immigrant is now under threat. The risk of consequences of speaking out online or on the streets are a real thing. So people feel sort of paralyzed in the face of what's happening. And we also have a lot to deal with here in one moment. So I think a real risk is also that people are just kind of turning away. If you look at elections over the last decades, you could argue that a lot of them have been won by the non-voters, right? Like determined by the non-voters. So anyway, get involved, I think, is a good thing. And then it also helps you develop your own ideas, because I think it's always helpful. If you want to really change something, it's helpful to know what the real levers of change are and how you can influence them, and so get closer.
Get involved is a good way to end this conversation, I think. I really want to thank Ece and Marietje, but I also want to thank Vincent van den Berg. He's been surveilling us the entire program. I don't know if you might have noticed this. It is part of the idea that this is a festival, Art Against the Tyrants, art and this conversation always goes together. And I think it was important to show that we know who Trump is, we know who Musk is, but we don't know who's actually surveilling us. And you guys did not know who Vincent was. So maybe that's a good idea or a good way to really get in touch and make it more physical, the threat that we're facing. Now he knows everything and everyone. Thank you all so much. See you later.